Hi, everyone. From me, Brent Graham of goodforthegame.co.za. It's Thursday night, 9 o'clock. It's time for the rugby, or the handicap rugby chat that matters. We're going to be looking at the Champions Cup rugby tonight, 19th to the 21st of Jan. Have a look at all of those current handicaps. And we'll also have a look at some other rugby if time permits at the end of the show. So let me introduce you to my guest. It's always nice to have a first-time guest on. And it's Nathan Mossman, the Mossman we'll call him. Nathan, welcome to the show, man. You are in New Zealand. It's about 8 o'clock your time now, eh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so not too early, but I'm a long time listener or watcher of the show, so great to come on and be able to talk.
Excellent. Well, I want to touch on Super Rugby with you in a second, but before that, how did you get into the sort of sports betting game? I see you've got a fantasy rugby podcast, and I've always said that the sort of transition from fantasy rugby to punting is a natural one.
Very much so. Yeah, totally agree. So I actually kind of got started in fantasy in the UK, so doing Premier League, doing NFL, and then got involved in fantasy rugby through a site called Fantasy Rugby Draft. And as you say, there's a lot of crossover between betting and fantasy. So I felt like I built up enough knowledge, domain knowledge, sort of around you get really in-depth knowledge of the teams and the players through fantasy, and then came from a technology background. So started dabbling in some machine learning, and then kind of combine those things together. So knowledge of rugby, knowledge of technology, an interest in betting, and sort of combine those things into what I'm doing now.
Excellent. Well, we'll talk more about that as we go on. Just to touch on Super Rugby, obviously you follow that quite closely. You're looking forward to that competition getting going. Who would be your favourites for the title? Would the Crusaders still be there now that Robinson's left?
No, I think it's the Chiefs' time. To me, I think outside of the final, I think they were the best team in the competition, and I think they'll continue. I think they've probably got a bit more continuity in terms of players, in terms of coaching. So I think it's the Chiefs' time, and not biased at all. By the fact that I'm a Chiefs fan.
I was going to say, that's a Chiefs jersey, is it?
This is not a Chiefs jersey. So this is actually a King Country jersey. So King Country play in the Heartland Championship. And there is a bit of a backstory to this jersey. So you can probably see here, this is the centenary jersey for the Union. And it's actually got every single player that ever played for the Union listed on it. And somewhere on here is my grandfather and probably about 3 or 4 other family members, cousins, uncles, etc., going back, way back, sort of the early part of the century.
Right, so good, great to have some history there. Well, look forward to talking some rugby with you. I'm very pleased you made contact with me through Twitter. Let's get into the Champions Cup then. Of course, we move on to the last round of group matches. 4 pools of 6, the top 4 go through. So lots for punters to look at, Nathan, this week in terms of team selection. Unfortunately, as we do this show on a Thursday night, we don't have all the teams in that, but we can certainly talk about Friday, and then look ahead and say, what do we expect teams to do? There are lots of rumors about what sort of teams will be fielded. And I'll get you straight into it with Glasgow Warriors. They're at home to Toulon, and Toulon, bottom of the table. They cost me an absolute packet last weekend when they didn't perform. I had them -6.5 against Munster. Munster actually winning that game in Toulon. So they are very much thrown in the towel. The handicap here shifted from -7.5, the Glasgow Warriors, to a current line of -13.5. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think, as you said, that this is, in some ways, it's a tricky weekend. I think to handicap. There's probably some common themes that you're looking out for. So for the URC teams, outside of, I think it's the Bulls and the Lions, I think, are playing. So the other teams are not playing, so I guess they're not looking ahead in the way that some other teams will. And I think a lot of the other teams, they're going to send a message about their motivation for this round by the kind of teams that they're selected. And as you said, Toulon sending a big message here. Really, they have no interest in this one. I think because of that, I think Glasgow can name their number here. I personally got a piece of them at 8.5. It moved pretty quickly, moved from there to 12.5. And I was more than happy to take another bite at 12.5. I think this could easily be a blowout. I would continue to bet this even at probably 13.5, possibly all the way up to sort of, 15, 16.
Right, yeah. And just to welcome the guys in the live chat, we've got JJ, Harry, and Stefan who's joined us so far. I've got to admit, I'm with you there. I'm sorry, I'm kicking myself a bit because I did identify this in the Good for the Game forum, and there were a couple of guys who came in and said Toulon likely to field a weaker side, but I never took the early -6.5. So now, you know what it's like when you miss that value, you're deciding whether you should still get involved or not. But yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I think the Glasgow Warriors still here at 13.5 could be the business. Werner joining us as well. How's it, Werner? So yeah, that opening game, you're quite firmly then on the Warriors. Tell me something, what time? That'll be about a similar time to now, eh? It'll be around 8, 9 in the morning for you in New Zealand to watch that game?
Yeah, that would be right. Yeah, 8 or 9.
Excellent. Yeah, not a bad time to watch some rugby. That's what I miss about South African teams in Super Rugby, was those 9 o'clock kickoffs in the morning on a Saturday morning. Obviously, we still get Super Rugby, but it's not quite the same for us now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and as I said, talk about teams sort of potentially looking forward, and to be fair, Toulon have got La Rochelle on deck. They're coming up for them, so you can understand why potentially they're looking past this. Not a lot for them to play for.
And tell me something, do you follow the top 14 as well? Because, I mean, it's interesting. I know a lot of guys talk about the top 14 and what's happening next week. And here in South Africa, we unfortunately don't get the TV coverage of it, which means I don't follow it so closely. And I think it's costing me a lot of money in this tournament because I haven't had that feel. What you've just said now is like, never mind what's happening this weekend. What's happening next weekend? What are they building for? Do you get coverage over there, or do you stream it?
We don't get coverage, and I don't stream it, but I do follow it because I do bet it. So it's one of those interesting kind of situations where sometimes there's benefits to actually not watching. So a lot of times the recaps I will do, like you can look at a box score and you can look at the way that the scoring sort of progressed throughout the game and understand if maybe it was a phony final game, maybe there was some late tries that kind of backdoored the cover or those sorts of things. Whether there were cards that maybe influenced things. So I'm probably more looking at that rather than trying to go in depth and watch every game. It just wouldn't be possible, to be honest. Like, I mean, I'm probably, trying to cover top 14 URC, the Prem, Pro Div 2 in France. So it's just, you're never going to get close to watching all these games. So I'm probably looking at other things.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about a Pro D2 later. I know we got Pablo on the Good for the Game forum, often comes in from some tips there as well. Let's move on to the second game then. It's Connacht up against the Bristol Bears. Now, this handicap, almost a choice game. It opened plus 0.5 Connacht when I saw it early in the week. Now, the money has come for Connacht, although they themselves haven't really got a hell of a lot to play for yet, do they?
No. This game, I'm probably sort of shouldering arms and letting this one go through to the keeper, to be honest. I think this is lined exactly where it should be. I don't have a strong preference either way. Bristol have been kind of on my no-fly list for a lot of the season. I've had relatively high expectations of them coming in, and they've consistently underperformed. So you get burned enough by a certain team and you sort of say, hey, I'm hands off. That they did have a good win against Sale a few weeks ago, but I wonder whether Sale's motivation was questionable at the time. And since then, Bristol very unimpressive, I think, over the course of the season.
So there's champs coming in saying I'm correct. They Connacht have a lot to play for. I guess by that you probably mean a place in the Challenge Cup. I guess that's true, unless there's anything else there that I'm not aware of. But I just wonder often how much these teams want to be in the Challenge Cup. But I guess for a team like Connacht, perhaps securing that Challenge Cup place will be quite a good thing. I just want to quickly have a look at the log. I didn't think Connacht, in theory, they could make it, but they would need Saracens to slip up to make it there. So I guess you're talking about the Challenge Cup. So there's something for them to play for. Okay, if he brings it up here, if they get a bonus point, win by 8, and deny Bristol a bonus point, they qualify. Okay, I hadn't noticed that. So a good one. When I went through my analysis, I didn't pick that up. So Connacht do have something to play for, and that probably also explains the money move in their direction. Right, let's go on to the next game. It's Harlequins. This is a handicap I think has been quite stable all week, Nathan. We've got -7.5 against Ulster. When I did my analysis of this game, without knowing teams in that, I thought, Ulster's still got potentially quite a bit to play for you.
Yeah, so Ulster were a team that I had circled as a team where the fixtures I thought probably gave them a good motivational spot, but it's difficult because and my numbers actually favour Ulster as well. But I'm just a bit wary of Quins, like I know what they're capable of. So it's Harlequins actually they have Leicester coming up next. So But the flip side is, that in recent times they have already rested Marcus Smith, for instance. So, I feel sometimes it's unlikely they're probably to rest too many players, in a short space of time. So I personally would kind of stay away from this one. If I was a forced bet, I would take Ulster.
Okay. And are you a points punter? Do you play total points in that, or do you focus more on the handicaps?
I used to, and then I wasn't able to really land on a formula that I was comfortable with. So I had more success betting sides, betting handicaps, points totals, whatever you want to call them. And the other thing about it is just the liquidity. So, in general, the limits are higher betting the handicaps than they are on the points totals. So I kind of decided to specialize basically on the handicaps.
Okay. And who do you bet with there in New Zealand?
I've got a few outs. So probably the main ones. So Bet365. We do have the local TAB in New Zealand, who I'm limited with. So that's not particularly helpful. I've also got Pinnacle Sportsbet in Australia that I use. Bet Online. What else? Bet Victor. Those would be the main ones. Speaking of getting limited, so I actually had the pleasure of, I think, being limited by Bet Victor this morning. I've noticed over the last sort of week to 2 weeks, that every time I put a bet in, the circle started going around slower and slower. There was obviously somebody looking at it in the background and having a think about it. And then this morning, it was like, okay, here's your $50.
I don't allow guys on the show unless they've been limited. It's a good sign as far as betting advice goes. Same problem here in South Africa. I could tell you lots of limiting. Let's get into the next game. This game taking place about 60 kilometers from me at Loftus Versfeld. It's the Vodacom Bulls against Bordeaux. Bordeaux, top of the group at the moment. But the Bulls here favourite. There was minus 8.5 early in the week. It's moved to 10.5. And this should be a cracking game. And I guess the betting suggests that Bordeaux are not going to put their strongest side out here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would make sense for them to do that. And this is obviously heavily dependent on team use. So Bordeaux are a very difficult team to want to go against this season. So I just see someone saying that they've sent the B team. In that case, I'd probably need to rerun some numbers and actually come back to you on that one. But because Bordeaux have been great this season. Like I talked about Bristol being on the no-fly list. Bordeaux almost the opposite. You don't want to play against them. But if it's the B team, obviously that changes things. The Bulls, I mean, they do have a game next week. So, but I did see that they've got Willie LaRue back, which, as I said, a lot of the time these teams are signaling their intentions by the kind of players that they're picking. So I think, it might suggest that the Bulls actually mean business here, in which case, like that minus 10 could, 10.5 could seem pretty small if the B team get rolled out.
Harry's saying the lines move to minus 12. We'll expect to drift further. So Des asking me about points here. Yeah, I have to say that this would probably be a points game for me. Bordeaux, by the natural way they play, score points. And the Bulls at Loftus, we have had quite a bit of rain over the last few days here in Johannesburg, but the conditions at Loftus, I'm expecting to be pretty good. And I would think that this could well be a game for the overs. Enjoy Peter Paul's comment here. He says, never mind limiting him. Bookies actually give him credit. Never mind limiting him. So anyway, they're putting you up and like the casinos do in the hotels and stuff like that. So I'm leaning very much towards the Bulls on this game. I do think but I think Sir Des has hit it spot on for me here, Nathan. I'm going to be looking at the points, possibly a buy of Bulls points. I say buy because I used to be a spread punter. Unfortunately, I haven't done that for a while. I used to buy shirt numbers and all sorts of crazy things. But I do think this is a game where potentially we are going to get some points. And if as much depth as there is in French rugby, I think if Bordeaux have sent a B team, then the Bulls may well put them to the sword. Yes, I'll be looking at a points play on the Bulls there.
Yeah, I think so. Just quickly, the other thing is that I think if these were both full strength teams, I think the Bulls would probably be a small favourite at home. And in general, it's kind of a rule of thumb, just things I've noticed in terms of the way the lines move. When teams do send out the B team, you're probably looking at 12 to 15, maybe even up to 17 points difference between the A and the B team. So if you do the maths on that, the 10.5, looks pretty good.
Yeah, it's something I've noticed as well. There's talk early in the week, right? The handicap came out 8.5. As you say, already everyone's sensing that Bordeaux will probably do a B team. And when the cap comes out, it never moves as quickly as I expect it to. It always goes 2 or 3 points. And eventually, I think someone said in one of the earlier games, I think it was Harry, he was saying he expects it to go out even further. You often find a game like this might start at 14.5, 15.5 points. So even though you missed the 8.5, there's still time if you do like the Bulls to get on that 10.5. I do expect this line to go out further.
Yeah, there is a general sort of thing there. If you are sort of steam chasing, you will feel like you've missed out when you see that line move. But often there is still value there, so I wouldn't be too concerned about that.
So Des asking me why I stopped spread betting. Actually, it was quite successful with my spread betting. So I had to open those. South Africa, some of the bookies offered spreads on the side, and they all eventually closed the spread betting down. So I had to open an account at SpreadX, and to open it, I actually opened a whole offshore bank account in the Isle of Man. It was ridiculous the effort I went to, and I did really well. And then I had 2 weekends where I lost an absolute fortune. In the end, I still got money over there, not in the bank account, and I could probably get it going again. But I just had 2 weekends where I thought, geez, take a break. And that break has turned into like sort of 4 or 5 years. The pressure of spread betting is just phenomenal compared to fixed odds betting. But I did love it. Absolutely loved it. And it was generally pretty successful. But the highs are high. And my word, the lows can be very, very low in the spread betting, unfortunately. But certainly might look to get back into it again. Let's have a look at the next game. Now, I'm wearing my Leinster shirt. Let me tell you, I'm wearing it begrudgingly because I lost a fortune on Leinster. It was my worst bet of last weekend. I went over 47.5 Leinster points, and they had 13 minutes to go. I just needed one more try, and they absolutely went to sleep at home, and they never scored another point. And they're not in my good books at the moment, but they're away to the Leicester Tigers, and this is quite an interesting one. The cap opened plus 9.5, shortened slightly into 8.5. And I'll tell you up front here, Nathan, I'm leaning towards the Tigers on this game. What are you going to do?
I think the same. I think this is, I think the motivational spot for Leicester is possibly questionable. We did see Pollard rested last week. So I think, if Leicester are putting him back in the lineup, they're again probably sending a message about their intentions. And the other thing is that, I like actually catching sort of that 8.5 and above at home on the home dog. So you'll find if you look at a typical kind of distribution of outcomes, there tends to be quite a big differential between the 7 and the 8 when you're looking at home dogs. So it tends to land 7 a lot more than it lands 8 is effectively what I'm saying. So I think that number makes me like Leicester as well.
Yeah, and I mean, looking at the table, Leicester obviously third position. They could in theory lose out, I think, if Sale and La Rochelle could go ahead of them. But I think potentially playing each other, I'll have to just double check on that. I think they are, yeah. So they should be through. But Leinster themselves, top of the table by 5 points. It looks unlikely that they're going to get kicked off. So I'm making Leicester Tigers quite a strong fancy here at the plus 8.5. I think they actually got a good shot at winning this game. I think the home team could even take the honour. So even a board bet here on Leicester. Let's move on to the next game. Now we're talking big handicaps. I don't know what your feelings are on big handicap games, Nathan, but we got Racing 92 minus 28.5 at home to Cardiff. This is 5th v 6th on the table, if I'm not mistaken. I had a look at it early in the week. If Ulster lose, Racing can still make it through to the round of 16. So I guess you'd say they more than likely they will have motivation going into this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's the irony of a cap this big with 2 winless teams playing each other. So the other thing with Racing is that they will know what they need to do by the time this game kicks off, just the way the fixtures are scheduled. So they'll probably, I mean, depending on how things pan out, they'll likely know that a win will be enough. I think with these big caps, they're the kind of bets where I don't think the general public like to make these. They feel stupid when they lose, whereas the truth is that there's a long tail on the outcomes that you can get on these big caps. So you can easily get blown out by 50, 60, but that doesn't necessarily make it a bad bet. You still only need it to land sort of 55% of the time, right? So it's a tough bet, but it's also some of the often some of the most fruitful ones. I think you can probably bet this late as well because it's probably going to continue to move. You'll get 30 plus probably. I mean, I didn't see the number that actually came up there on the screen, sorry, but I think it was at 28.5. So I think it's those ones are kicking along. So if you can get, let's say, get and I have seen bigger numbers kicking around, so 31, 32. Racing also with Toulouse on deck next week, so that's obviously a huge game in the top 14. It's you don't feel good about betting on Cardiff, but I think that's the direction that I would go if I could get a good number late.
Right. Might be worth a wait. I just want to go back to the Leicester-Leinster game because Joe has come in and pointed out that he feels Leinster are going to go full tilt to ensure they get that home semi. And I must admit, I hadn't considered that option. Probably be a little bit wary there. He reckons Leicester have got a big game next weekend and may well field a B side. So I guess the advice here to punters, Nathan, is, unless you're fairly confident, like that team are going to field the B side or an A side, quite often, and I notice the betting seldom moves before the teams come out in these leagues. The bookies are setting it on the Monday, and there's very little movement, maybe 2 or 3 points here or there. And then when the teams come out, the real movement occurs. So I guess the advice to punters, if you're not sure, rather hold fire on the handicap.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Even before, coming into the early part of the week, when I looked through the fixtures and looked at, potential motivations and resting, it wasn't clear even then because it's the way this tournament is set up that everybody feels like they have a chance. There's very few teams that are eliminated. There were no home playoff games decided at this point. So lots of teams qualified, but none of the final positions actually decided. So a lot of uncertainty, and I don't like being early in the week with that kind of uncertainty. I'm willing to wait, see the team news, and I'll back myself that I can beat the closing number using my own numbers.
Well, for Reed coming in, and no doubt, Reed, I bet you were watching the cricket. That's why you popped in a bit late. Wait for team sheets. These second teams are dicey. Just to go back to Joe there, and Nathan, maybe you can help me because I kind of looked at the qualification criteria. Top 4 teams go through, and obviously the top teams have the home. But what Joe's saying to me suggests here that your actual points that you finish on in your group even is going to be relevant as well, because when it gets down to like the quarterfinals and the semi-finals, then it will be, say, Leinster come top of their group with 18 points. Am I right in saying if Toulouse have got 20 points, then they would host the semi? Is that what Joe is saying here?
That's right, yeah. So I think it's predetermined in the round of 16, but then once you get past that, then they start looking at the points. So it's a little bit convoluted, and as I said, still everybody effectively playing for everything. So there weren't any really clear spots where you could say early in the week, okay, I can definitely see that this team has everything to play for and this has none. It wasn't that clear.
100%. And Joe, thanks for bringing that to my attention. Certainly, I hadn't really focused. I really got back from holiday and started looking at this tournament last week, and I hadn't had a good look at that. So very good advice there. Munster minus 10.5 against the Northampton Saints. Munster, they cost me a packet last week. This Munster team seem to do their best work when sort of the chips are down, and they are playing against the Saints, who currently top the log in the group.
Yeah, so I was on Munster last week. I felt like I was the only person in the world that was, but that turned out obviously pretty well for me. This is a strange line. I don't 100% understand it. I think if you were able to tell me that both teams were full strength, what would the line be? I think it's probably Munster as a small favourite, maybe 4.5, 3.5 around that. So I'm assuming it looks to me like they've baked in the fact that Northampton are going to rest players. But I saw something interesting on Twitter, and I apologise, I don't remember the handle of the person, so I can't sort of give an attribution to them. But they were claiming that they had some sort of inside knowledge, or whether that's from sources close to the team or a man in a pub, I don't know. But they were saying that Northampton were not going to rest, and did point out that they're playing Newcastle next week, which effectively is kind of a bye. So if you're going to rest players, that's the week to do it, right? So if Northampton don't rest players, if they go into this full noise, I think this line is wrong. But as I said, I think the other thing I'm assuming that bookmakers do is that when they're dealing with uncertainty, they'll sort of price it up in that way. So they might be looking at this and saying, well, there's a 50% chance that Northampton rest, 50% that they don't. We're going to pick some sort of middle ground, and they've landed on this kind of 10.5 number. Because as I said, I don't understand it if the assumption is that both teams are full strength.
Yeah, and I mean, given what Joe says there as well, I mean, there could be certainly some motivation still for Northampton to try and top the log and get as many points as possible as far as going deep in the tournament goes. So this looks a very tricky one.
And yeah, I guess this is one I like your phrase you used, shoulder arms and let it go through to the keeper. I think this one potentially I could be letting go through to the keeper on Saturday. Right, we're wading through the games nicely. This is a Stade Francais at home to the Stormers. This was plus 5.5 early in the week. It has come in slightly. Stade Francais, they were the team that cost me last week. Not in the sense that they played well, but that Leinster couldn't get the 47 points. And I think it was, so Desi was saying he was on the plus 38 Leinster, and they conceded their only points right on the hooter. It was terrible. What do you make of this one? Because I'm battling to call these French teams this year. Is Stade Francais, last week they clearly didn't care. They're now at home. Are they going to be throwing everything at this one, or do they have a big top 14 fixture next week, something we should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, they're actually traveling all right in top 14. But for whatever reason, I get the feeling that they're not particularly bothered maybe about going into the Challenge Cup either. So this is a tricky one. My numbers are kind of on the fence about it, and it's one where I think this line feels about right for where we are now, which is dealing with a lot of unknowns. So I think all's going to be revealed, I think, when the teams come out. But it's not one I'd be getting involved in, especially at this stage.
Yeah, team news on this one, and Stormers as well. Of course, Sente, very much a second string team over to Leicester early in the tournament, and quite well. They virtually came away with a win there. They ended up losing by 9 points, I think. But you've also got to be a little bit careful. Some of these second teams, or sort of slightly second string players, are not that bad as well. So wait for the team sheets on that one. Farid does say he thinks Stade will win that well. And let's just see what Joe's comment is there. French teams look at the top 14 game. If it's a home tie, then they'll play their seconds. Yeah, that's, I think, probably a fair comment as well. Right, we go on to another pretty big handicap now, Nathan. Saracens minus 18.5 against Lyon. Another game where, in theory, Lyon could still have quite a lot to play for in terms of, getting up there in points. But are they taking the view that, look, we're not going to probably win this game, let's rather send a weakened team? Because that's certainly what the betting suggests.
Yeah, look, I lean to Lyon at this point. As I said, there's still a lot of unknowns. Backing underdogs so far in this tournament has actually been pretty profitable. I think maybe people have kind of overestimated. I don't know if it's the motivation of the big favourites or home advantage, whatever it is. Saracens will know what they need to do by the time this game kicks off, and so I think there's a situation possibly here where if Bristol lose, then maybe bet Lyon at that point, because Saracens may not be going full noise at that point if they know that they don't need to. Yes.
Okay, so another game too. Some real tricky encounters, and as you say, Nathan, it's just the way this whole tournament's been set up, and the fact that it's also like it's scattered over a number of months, really, and very, very confusing. And I suppose it does give you the opportunity to perhaps gain an edge over the bookmakers, but as I proved last week, things can also go horribly wrong. Farid saying Lyon always put up a fight.
Except when they don't, which is, didn't they lose last week to Munster, right? Was it? So you never know what to expect there. Sale Sharks up against La Rochelle. La Rochelle, the defending champions, of course, plus 6.5 this handicap. I think it's been fairly stable all week. I'd have to say, if La Rochelle bring their A game, I would expect them to put the Sale Sharks away. But the Sale Sharks have punched above their weight this season. Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of this will come down to whether I don't know whether George Ford is still injured or not. If Ford doesn't play, I like La Rochelle here. I like the fact that they're laying less than 7. I think, as again, it's a sort of a pseudo key number in rugby. We don't really have key numbers in the way they do in the NFL, but that's probably the one of the closest things that we do have to that. So they'll be live for a home playoff game. I think. Yeah, if Ford doesn't play, I'd probably lean La Rochelle.
Right, let's move on to the next game. Toulouse minus 17.5 against Bath. This is a top of the table clash, but you would make Toulouse favourites if it was strength v strength at home. But looking at the betting, and Nathan, it's like the bookies are saying that Bath are likely going to sacrifice this one.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's the assumption here, right? Because otherwise it's a bit of a disrespectful line, really, to Bath, who've been fantastic this season. Bath do have Bristol coming up, which I think you'd say it's not the toughest game, but at the same time, I don't think it's one they would necessarily look past. So I think there is always a danger that they will rest. We'll kind of have to see the messages that they send with their selections. Partly, this will also depend on the Quins result, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about, by the time we get through to Sunday, or even, when the Saturday games end, you'll probably be able to look at the table, and all this conversation that we're having about motivation will be different. A lot of these teams will know what they need to do, know whether they're still live for home games, and that potentially, for me anyway, would sort of factor in. So some of these games are sort of wait and see. So depending on what Quins do, will sort of depend on whether Bath actually have anything to play for here potentially. So I think if you could tell me that both teams are going into this full strength, I would probably fancy Bath here. But as I said, we're going to have to wait and see.
You're right. And then the last game of the weekend, as far as the Champions Cup goes, Bayonne plus 1.5, a slight movement towards the Exeter Chiefs. Yeah, I looked at this game. I do think my initial thought was that the Exeter Chiefs are going to win this one. What do you think, Mossman?
I'm actually going the other way. So I didn't, as I said, I didn't sort of fancy too many early week bets, but this was one I looked at, and I do like the spot here for Bayonne. I mean, I think you're definitely buying low on them, right? They were pretty woeful last week. That was a game I actually did see, and they were playing against, firstly, a really good Saints team last week, but also they were their own worst enemy. There were a lot of passes sort of going to ground behind people, overthrowing the lineouts and gifting tries that way. So and I think they kind of gave up pretty early on in the contest in that one. So, but I do like the spot here at Bayonne being back home. Full disclosure, I actually took a piece of them at plus 2.5. I think they're probably one of the rare ones where at least early on the week you can see some a potentially good motivational spot. But again, we'll see what kind of team Exeter want to put out.
Yeah, I think that's going to be very interesting to see what Exeter put out there as well. Exeter super lucky to beat Glasgow. I didn't see that. I actually packed up after the Leinster game for Reed. I was, it's not often it happens to me, but I just was cut full in Afrikaans word that Nathan probably doesn't know. But I was like, I just had enough. I just thought, stuff it. I actually packed up. I didn't watch a lot of the rugby after the Leinster loss last week. And so I didn't get that one. Now, before we go into best bets, and we will talk about the best bets at the end, what else have you got your eye on this weekend then, Nathan?
I did see the comment there just about Exeter being lucky, and I think there's probably quite a lot of truth to that. Like, they've had 3 comeback wins in the Champions Cup, but also at Prem level, like, they've kind of become a bit famous for sort of winning late. And, people might look at that and think that's, a good attribute to have. I tend to look at it and think, well, there's quite a lot of luck involved in that. And there's going to be some regression to the mean. Potentially, Exeter not as good as their results suggest.
Right. And anything else? I just want to, before I actually ask you that, I just want to bring up Peter Paul. There's a massive UFC fight taking place. Now, I don't follow the UFC that closely, but Dricus du Plessis is taking on Sean Strickland. That's early hours of, well, not early hours, it's probably about 6:30 Sunday, South African time. And Dricus is the slight underdog there at evens. Peter Paul, I was thinking of doing a video preview of it as well, perhaps getting a guest on who knows his UFC. What do you think of that idea? I'll have a look tonight and see if we can get something going there. So just that's predominantly for South African guys. Is the UFC quite big there? Do the New Zealanders follow it?
Yeah, we do, because we've got Israel. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this because I know I'll get it wrong, but he's the Nigerian New Zealander. He was world champ at one of the weight grades for a while, so I'm not sure if how familiar you are with it, but he's definitely a very high profile in New Zealand.
Yeah, probably like Dricus here in South Africa, so we're hoping to have a champion. The Admiral got some good advice for you on Twitter. Stick your notifications on, follow all the teams, and make sure you got the notifications on for around 12 o'clock tomorrow when the teams come out, and you can hopefully get onto it before the bookies do. Just quickly, before we talk some more rugby, Murhum Dricus, which basically, Nathan, means, Murhum. I don't know how to describe it in English, but basically beat him up. And Dricus will sleep Izzy after he put Sean away. Izzy, I think, a reference to, what's the other, the guy that Strickland beat last time? I forgot his name now. But let's talk other rugby this weekend. I know you follow the other leagues. Is there anything else on we should be paying attention to? Anything you're waiting for, perhaps from a team news perspective?
No, actually, so that's one of the good things about the French Pro D2 is that the team news is all out by this point because the games are all played, all of them played on a Friday night, I think, in France. Or maybe it's a Saturday. I can't remember exactly. I get confused with the time zones, but I know that there's a game kicking off in about 25 minutes, and that is... And you'll have to excuse me, I'm kind of going to butcher these French team names because the thing is I realized is when I looked at the list is that there's a lot of names in here where I've read them a million times, but I've never had to say them out loud. So I have no idea how they're pronounced. So Béziers or Béziers and Provence, I'm assuming that's what it is, which is, as I said, kicking off in about 25 minutes. So I think this is a really strong fancy for me this week was Béziers at -7.5. Now, to be fair, I think that line's probably moved. If you can find an 8.5, I'd still get in amongst that. I think that this probably should be, closer to 10 or 12, based on my modelling. So that's probably one of the biggest ones for the week. Still working through a few of the other games because, as I said, the team news literally just came out just before we came on air. So Aurillac plus 11.5 would be another one I would look at. Montauban plus 17.5 and Dax plus 18.5. So there's quite a few underdogs in there, but I think it's probably true of a lot of leagues is that there often is value on the underdogs. People aren't kind of keen to take them, and Pro D2 is an interesting kind of league because it's unlike a lot of the others. So the home advantage, if you sort of looked at that and tried to work it out historically, is probably something around 8 points, which is massive. Like, by comparison, it's usually sort of 3.5, 4.5 against most of the other leagues. So away teams hardly ever win in the league, but very, very different, from covering versus winning. So I think a lot of people will just look at it and say away teams never win. So, I'm just going to back the favorite. But, you do see some pretty big caps at times. And, there's often value on the underdog.
Right. Well, let's move on then to the end of the show. We'll talk best bets. Just a reminder, if you're not on our newsletter yet, and I think most of the people who watch the show are on the newsletter, there is a link to the newsletter, which goes out every Friday, and normally quite late on Friday, because particularly in the Champs Cup, I want to have a look at the teams. I must admit, didn't cover myself in glory enough first week back last weekend, so I'll be looking to bounce back. If you're not on that newsletter yet, click on that link and sign up for that one. Right, let's talk best bets now. What are you eyeing out? If I had to say, pick your best, maybe 2 or 3 bets of the weekend, what would you go for, Nathan?
Yeah, I think Glasgow would be number one, partly because now that we have those team lineups, we'll remove that uncertainty. And as I said, I've bet it already, but I would have no issue with continuing to bet it at -12.5, or if you can find that, which I think you probably still can.
Okay, looking at Johan Esthuizen's treble here. Glasgow -10.5, Tigers plus 8.5, and Connacht -2.5 at 5.3 to 1. I like Joe's comment as a dad who watched mini rugby games. My son's actually out of school now. He starts varsity. We in a couple of weeks' time. So I'm hoping he plays some rugby there and I can go and watch, even though it is a bit of a drive. He says massive game in Ireland. In Ireland, Setonians under 14 taking on Clontarf, I think it says, in a massive derby. The public order unit of the Gardaí will be on duty to keep the dads separated. Yes, I love those sort of schoolboy rugby games. But Nathan, it's been great to have you on. I just want to see what Fareed sort of says in clothing. He goes, Stade, Connacht, and La Rochelle and Leinster are his bets for the weekend. Mine ones, I'll take into account everything I've heard and come up with a bet in the newsletter. But Nathan, it's been great having you on the show. Hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, great to be here. Great to sort of get to talk and be part of the show.
Excellent. Well, I'll chat to you now afterwards as well. But just to say thanks to all the guys in the live chat. Great contributions as always. Looking forward to this weekend's rugby. There's also, of course, the SA20 cricket, which I'm really enjoying at the moment. Finally hit a top bat earlier. Will Jacks getting 100 there for the Pretoria Capitals and managing to bank that. Still a bit behind in the tournament, but a bit like the Tour de France, as one of the guys, I think it was Vin Naidu, said on Twitter, I tend to finish strong, so hopefully come up with a few winners. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week, Thursday night, 9 o'clock for the Handicap Rugby Chat That Matters.